So for many years now, Oda has basically said that he has been excited to finally draw the Wano Kuni arc. Now it is true that any point during the One Piece story is not impossible. In fact, it's likely to find some source of inspiration or parallel to some famous story. Oda is famous for it. But in Wano, he has taken this to another level. It almost seems as though in every chapter you can find some kind of allusion to a famous Japanese folktale. This clearly seems to be something that Oda decided beforehand to emphasize within the Wano arc. Wano representing Japan, he wanted to make an arc that really embraces the folklore of Japan. And so as a theorist, this makes the Wano Kuni arc interesting. It's usually not my type of theory, but this is the kind of theory that I think would excel in this arc, is one that revolves around understanding Japanese folklore and culture. So today I want to talk about the Kitsune, or the nine-tailed fox, and how this mythological creature could make an appearance in the arc. In fact, we might already have seen one or more. Hey YouTube, JoBoy here. So, one thing that I find to be of particular importance, as we are still, I think, at the beginning of the Wano arc, is its emphasis on mythological creatures. We already have a dragon and a Yamata no Orochi. As far as Kaido being a dragon, you guys know if you follow my channel that I'm not entirely convinced that he is not just straight up a real dragon with some other kind of different powers. But regardless, in the past of Wano, real dragons actually existed there. Ryuma is famous for having slayed one. Almost immediately upon arriving to Wano, we are introduced to a Komainu, or sort of lion dog that is in Japan often depicted as a statue guarding a shrine, but in Wano is a real thing. And it's not alone as being a questionably mythological creature. The stag that we can see Hawkins riding on as they meet Zoro and Luffy could very well be a kirin, which is essentially a legendary stag. And as if to embellish the connection between the two creatures, the Komain and maybe the Kirin, is the fact that they are very similar in their designs, the way that Oda chose to draw them, specifically their eyebrows, the flowing, almost fire-like manes, and tails, and both possess polka dot pattern coats. Which, as a side note, also reminds me of the Skypiea arc and Gonfal's Pegasus, or he was originally a bird, ate a horse fruit, became a Pegasus from that way, but also had the same sort of polka dotted patterns, if there is truly some sort of significance to that choice in design. We don't know where that was from. It seemed very foreign to Skypiea. Maybe it's from Wano. And again, speaking of the similarities between the eyebrows of the stag and of the Komainu, we also see the same sort of design in Hitetsu's mask, and he is clearly trying to represent a Tengu. So it's possible that is a design feature shared between the mythological creatures of Wano. And I don't think that we should forget that tanuki or raccoon dogs actually exist in Wano, and the sumo wrestler suggests that there's something that he commonly eats because it's one of his favorite foods. Now granted guys, a tanuki in Japanese mythology is not just, a random creature that you would find, an animal. It has magical powers that we do not see implied from the particular tanuki that we saw. But I don't think that this precludes the existence of the magical variety, especially because with the way that Oda depicted it, it's actually very similar to the lore behind the kitsune. As far as I'm aware, there is no difference between a regular fox and a kitsune other than its age. And a lot of people in Japan had them as pets. But yeah guys, anyway, it's from these observations and a couple others that I personally believe that Wano will be the home of many actual Japanese folktale creatures. And at the very least, I am convinced that these creatures will have some significance to the story, because Tama's abilities are of some significance in the stories. If you guys remember, Tama has the ability, she can produce a kibi dango from her cheek, she pinches it off, she feeds it to some kind of creature, and she tames it. And for some reason, even before she was captured by Kaido's subordinates, Hitetsu told her that her abilities would be of interest to them. He warned her to never use her abilities in front of anybody. Why exactly does Kaido's crew wish to tame creatures? Why exactly is that significant to them and the story? So with all this in mind guys, with the pre-established idea that there may be actual mythological creatures in Wano that are important, I think that one that is conspicuously absent is the kitsune, especially with how prevalent it is in the folklore of Japan. So I personally would be very, very surprised if throughout Wano we never meet foxes or get introduced to the lore of the kitsune. And I'm fairly certain that this lore exists because Kinemon's epithet is Foxfire, which directly relates to the kitsune. Foxfire essentially being a phenomenon that is created when two kitsune marry. So anyway guys, let's take ourselves back to the beginning of the Wano arc. We were introduced to Otsuru, and if you guys remember as we were following along, my initial suspicion of her is that she may be some kind of mythical creature, possibly a kitsune. And so there's a couple reasons for this. To start off with, it's very clear that her story, at least when she was first introduced, was inspired by the Japanese folktale Tsuru no Ongeishi. To make a short story even shorter, essentially what you had is you had a crane who could shapeshift into human form. A particular family did her right, and as is alluded to in a One Piece chapter itself, Tsuru returned the favor. And the story ends with the family finally realizing or discovering that she was a crane, who possessed magical abilities. So yeah, when you first see Tsuru introduced in the story, what she's wearing with essentially swan or crane designs on her kimono, as well as many of the things from the chapter itself clearly inspired by the story Tsuru no Ongeishi. But there are alternative versions of the story where instead of being a crane, she was in fact a kitsune, because there is a lot of Japanese lore specifically relating to mythical creatures of them being able to shapeshift, and this is a power that kitsune often had. I say often, but it's essentially always. This is why when we were introduced to Katarina Devon's new Devil Fruit, the Kitsune Fruit, the first ability that she showcases is the ability to transform her appearance. Kitsune equals shapeshifting. That is, I think, their most defining magical ability. And sort of sidetrack this for just a moment, we were talking about Tanuki earlier. Tanuki also have this ability to change their appearance or shapeshift, and they're often analogous and intertwined in lore relating to Kitsune. I believe that they are often portrayed as a kind of rival. But anyway, to take this back to Tsuru, the fact that her introduction in the story is based off of a folk tale of a shape-shifting creature automatically puts that thought into our mind as a possibility. And other details within the story only just sort of heighten the curiosity. I find Tsuru to be incredibly mysterious. For some reason, she had hidden herself in the tail of the Komainu, and neither Zoro nor Luffy seemed to be able to sense her until she just appeared. Then Zoro and Luffy begin to question her about how she was in the tail the entire time, and she dodged every question. Also in this same chapter, it seems to be implied by Hawkins that he would be unable to capture Luffy and Zoro because somebody would provide them a means to escape. The only person there being Tsuru, which almost second-handedly hypes her up as having possibly abilities that we're not aware of. But you know, aside from all of the suspicion and the connections with stories, perhaps the most convincing bit of evidence for this entire theory is Kinemon's observation when he finally saw Tsuru again after 20 years. He says that Tsuru has not changed. She looks the same as she did 20 years ago. That's not an insignificant amount of time. I'll be honest with you guys, this has me convinced that at the very least, Oda wants us to believe in the possibility of Tsuru being a mythical creature. It may not be the case, but it is at the very least a red herring because it is oh so consistent with her possibly being a mythical creature such as a kitsune. Kitsune, depending on the mythology, could live up to 1,000 years. Over 20 years, their appearance would not change. Her appearance should have changed. And what's also interesting about this is that this is consistent with the kinds of folk tales that are told of kitsune. Now, there's a diverse number of kitsune stories. Some are good, some are malevolent, some are tricksters. Some focus around a kitsune assuming the appearance of a beautiful girl, sometimes a small boy, an old man. But one of the more common tropes is that of a wife, a dutiful wife. A man happens to fall in love with a girl who happens to be a kitsune and does not reveal that to him. They get married, they have children, until later on he finds out. And that's precisely what Tsuru has been to Kinemon. Over 20 years, she has not taken up a new lover. And I just want to say this again and emphasize it because I think that it's really interesting. Yes, kitsune in humans could actually have children, and their children, which would be half-breeds, also had various magical powers relating to their kitsune parent. But yeah, we'll get back to this later. Anyway guys, I am convinced of the possibility that Tsuru is secretly a kitsune. But I would say that up until this point in the video, I've only said things that I have said before. We've talked about Tsuru, we've talked about the magical creatures being of interest in Wano. JB, do you have something new to add to this? Are you going somewhere? And the answer, guys, is most definitely yes. And I suppose that we will start with KOMURASAKI. As I said a little bit earlier in the video, when it comes to kitsune, there are various different kinds. There are the messengers of Inari, the god Inari, who is the god of rice and harvest. These kitsune are typically perceived to be good and guardians. But then there are what I call rogue kitsune. Essentially, they're tricksters, sometimes even malevolent. And so this is another common trope of kitsune folklore. Often they take on the appearance of a beautiful woman. They then lure men to a luxurious mansion for a night of passion, in which they wake up in the morning, the men do, either dead or with their money taken. In fact, more generally, kitsune were often portrayed as thieves. Does that not remind you of KOMURASAKI's story? Seducing men and taking their money, leading them to her luxurious mansion. Honestly guys, it's almost beat for beat, and I have to assume that this is significant, that Oda intended for KOMURASAKI to parallel some kitsune lore. And the plot absolutely thickens when you consider that when KOMURASAKI plays music, and when she appears in the interludes between the parts of the Wano Kuni arc, what is the mask that she is wearing? It is a kitsune mask. And it was even stated in the story that for whatever reason, whenever she plays her most beautiful song, she always has to wear the mask. And so earlier I said that in this sort of seductress kitsune folklore, they often lure men to their luxurious mansion. Well, these kitsune usually didn't have an actual mansion. What they had was magical abilities. I said that kitsune are probably most defined by their ability to shapeshift or change their appearance, but their other most consistent ability is their ability to create illusions. So a couple of chapters ago, we had this scene that a lot of us just don't understand. We don't know how it's going to be explained, but it appears as though Kiyoshiro killed KOMURASAKI, but we know that KOMURASAKI is not dead, obviously. But how do you get out of this? Where is the trick? That is what we are looking for. And a possible answer is an illusion. The illusions it was possible for kitsune to create in folklore could be incredibly intricate and believable. And I really think that this interpretation of what occurred is surprisingly plausible. I mean, you have history between KOMURASAKI and Kiyoshiro. It's sort of suggested that maybe in part he raised her or brought her up. He might know of her abilities. In fact, KOMURASAKI may be a plant inside the government to get close to the shogun, a kind of spy. Before Kiyoshiro attacked her, he asked her if she was ready to possibly cast her illusion and convince the entire room that she had died. And so guys, we are about to go balls deep. I want you to get your tinfoil hats on because it is time. When you're talking about KOMURASAKI, the most popular theory, train of thought, is that she may be Hiyori, Momonosuke's sister, and the princess or queen of Wano. But the problem that I have with this idea, at least as it is that it is just way too obvious. Oda is being very, very forward with the clues that KOMURASAKI may be Hiyori. It's almost too obvious. And I'm left in a situation where I think that it either is a red herring, it's so obvious that it's not going to be true and Oda's going to go in another direction, or that it is only part of the truth and not exactly what Oda wants to surprise us with. Yes, KOMURASAKI is Hiyori, but that's not the twist. The twist is that KOMURASAKI is Hiyori and a kitsune. The daughter of Odin is a kitsune, which also casts some interesting implications on Momonosuke. But yeah guys, don't turn off the video yet, bear with me. I have two bits of evidence or things which make this an interesting speculation. First and foremost guys, is that the family of Odin Kozuki, or the Kozuki family generally speaking, most have names relating to food. The name Oden is a traditional Japanese dish. His father, sukiyaki, is the same another traditional Japanese dish. Momonosuke means peach boy, as well as the various districts or islands, territories of Wano itself. Udon and curry and kibi, etc. And so why exactly is this interesting when you're talking about Komurasaki potentially being a Kozuki as well as a Kitsune? Well, an interesting facet of Kitsune lore is that they're pretty closely tied with food. More so than is normal for folktale creatures. Now, I'm not saying that all of the dishes here are directly associated with Kitsune, but it's not normal when you read lore of a mythical creature for it to be specifically noted what their favorite food is, and to have dishes named after them. Like, for instance, Kitsune Udon. And it just so happens that one of the favorite pastimes of more capricious Kitsune would be to hide food. So I just want to point out the connection between Kitsune and food, because I think that it's interesting because for whatever reason, Oda decided to name the Kozuki family and the countries of Wano itself after him, which is just kind of odd. It's an odd choice. But just imagine for a second that Wano has been ruled for many centuries by a family of Kitsune, or descendants of a Kitsune. And then take a moment to recall the long history that the Kozuki family has had, the ties that it has with the minks of Zou. Could it be any more fitting to be loyal to a family that is related to a mythical creature in a country that is run by descendants of at least a mythical creature? But I want to make this clear, guys. It's pretty consistent that the Kitsune is very long-lived, and so if the rulers of Wano live too long, that would become something that would be very apparent to the citizens of Wano, as something that would be very out of place. So I don't really believe that Oden or his father or Komurasaki or Momonosuke is a Kitsune. I just think that they may have had a Kitsune ancestor, and have been able to inherit certain Kitsune abilities. Maybe even abilities that aren't inherited directly down the line, but may resurface at various points in time. Similar to the powers of Poseidon and Shirahoshi. Again, guys, Kitsune and humans could have children, and their children would oftentimes have Kitsune-related abilities. So things like we've already speculated in this video, such as Komurasaki having illusion-based abilities inherited from her Kitsune ancestor. Or even Momonosuke's ability to command Zunisha. I just want to throw these out there. And another thing that I just want to throw out there as a possibility is Kozuki Toki being a Kitsune. And this fact being why both Momonosuke and Komurasaki, if she is Hayuri, both having special abilities. In some stories, Kitsune had the ability, once they became old and wise enough, to manipulate time and space. And I just personally think that Toki has a mysterious, almost magical aura to her, as though there is more to know. It's not normal to be prophetic. It's not normal to leave your children's future lives up to fate, and not be there to protect them when you have the choice. It's not normal to just accept your death when there's still a possibility of escape, unless perhaps you've already lived a very long time. But you know, we've been talking almost exclusively of Komurasaki and Tsuru and the Kozuki family, but I'm also looking at characters such as Kiroshiro, who just based on how he is designed is very fox-like. Just as we could speculate that Komurasaki escaped death because of an illusion, it doesn't necessarily have to be her using that ability, it could also have been Kiroshiro. Or we can even sit here and talk about Grandpa Hyo. Do I think that he is a Kitsune? Probably not, but I do wonder whether or not he is some kind of folklore, mythological creature, or a descendant of one. Because his hair looks exactly like the tail of the Komainu, as well as what we think might be the Kirin, the stag. Sort of flowing fire. That's weird. He also has the very same eyebrows as Kaido, as Hitetsu's Tengu mask, the Komainu, and the Kirin. All these eyebrows are exactly the same. All of these related to mythological creatures except for Grandpa Hyo. It just makes you wonder. But yeah, there's more that I could say, but I think that it's probably pretty good here. I just want to throw this out there, guys. I think that mythological creatures are important, and some of these connections are fascinating, particularly the ones relating to Tsuru, and then Komurasaki's portrayal possible parallels with a kitsune could have a ton of meaning. And I don't want to create the impression that I expect everybody that we see in this arc to secretly be some kind of kitsune. That's not really where I'm going from, but I just want to point out the reasons why we might have to be suspicious of these characters. But yeah, as always guys, share your thoughts in the comment section below. Tell me what you are thinking. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike the video if you disliked the video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content. And as always guys, have a wonderful day.